I'm Nicola Tallant, and Crime World is back at Cork Opera House on March 27th, where Niall and I will be uncovering the secret world of Christy, the Dapper Don Kinahan. Join us for this live show. Tickets, corkpodcastfestival.ie.
Allison Morris was in court. Allison, welcome back.
Thanks for having me.
So this witness was a former partner of Natalie McNally. We'll go back to yesterday when he started his evidence. It was revealed in court that he was arrested last week on suspicion of making threats to kill a woman that he had been seeing at the time of Natalie McNally's death. We'll get to that as we go further along. What did he say about the nature of his relationship with Natalie at the time of her death?
So this witness has an anonymity. There's an order in place that we can't name him, and that is for the protection of others. So that is as it stands. So just for, I suppose, the purposes of this, we will call him the witness. It's maybe the best way to refer to him, just so people know who I'm speaking about. So the witness said that he had dated Natalie McNally for over a year. They'd met on Tinder, on the dating app, in the summer of 2019. And then he had moved in with her fairly quickly. He had lived in her house in Lurgan, the house where she was later found murdered. And that around sometime after that, about a year or so after that, he was offered a housing executive house flat in Dunmurry. And so he decided to move out. I think he said it was too good an opportunity to turn down, and that Natalie wasn't particularly happy about this. She didn't want him to move out. He said she liked him living there. And that he then moved out and then quite quickly started a new relationship with someone else. As we know, at the time of Natalie's death, she was 15 weeks pregnant to Stephen McCullagh, who currently stands charged with her murder. And she had moved on with Mr. McCullagh. The witness had moved on with another woman who was living with him at the time, but they continued to keep in touch. A lot of that, those conversations, a lot of the messages were emails at the start, and we do know that in the last 2 days of Natalie's life there were also some WhatsApp messages, and they continued right on until that Sunday, the Sunday that police believe she was murdered that evening. Her body was found the next day, and there's discussions about the World Cup match that was taking place that day. She loved Messi, who was playing for Argentina, and there were messages about that. So there was messages exchanged in that way. There were also messages that were read into evidence that were of a highly sexual nature. And, you know, I must stress that the witness did say, while he wasn't proud of those messages and while they were uncomfortable to look at, given the circumstances we are now, they were two consenting adults, and these were consensual messages that were exchanged between the two of them. He last had said he met up with Natalie McNally in October of 2022. On that occasion, he had been sending her messages suggesting that they meet up and have sex, and he went to her Lurgan home. He said after that encounter that Ms McNally was raging at him. It was very quick. He said he was only there for around 10 minutes, and that he knew that she was raging and she was upset with both him and herself. I think it exactly said it was heartbroken. The last time I saw Natalie, she was lying on her bed on her side, and I could tell she was raging at me. I'd come around and had sex, and then I was away. That memory of the last time seeing her, I wish it was something nicer than her looking annoyed at me, annoyed at herself. I definitely took advantage of Natalie, he said. I feel horrible about it. And he spoke of Natalie's nature and her kindness, and the fact that if he asked her for help, he knew that she always would, because that was just the kind of person she was.
And he did lash out at Stephen McCullagh in court.
He did. He said that Natalie, and he has repeatedly said this throughout his evidence, that Natalie was his best friend, that she was the nicest girl ever, was how he described her. He said she had helped him so much. I said I feel horrible, I wish she'd been better to her. And that at one stage he said, during his evidence, he said, Natalie was my best friend and you killed her, you. And then he said the C word. At this stage, he was warned by the judge about his conduct while in court. And there has been several warnings from the judge, Mr. Justice Kinney, throughout this as the witness has sort of deviated off, I suppose, on tangents. And he's been told a few times to answer the questions that are asked of him. But also, he has been warned and told that he has the right as a witness not to incriminate himself in any other criminality. And this is, by, just to make things clear, not criminality attached to Natalie McNally's murder. This is just about other events. And his evidence now is in its full second day, and he is expected to give more evidence tomorrow, which will be Wednesday, until lunchtime tomorrow, and that should bring an end to the witnesses' evidence in this case.
He accused Stephen McCullagh of the murder again. He said that he knew he hadn't done it, but he looked at Mr McCullagh and said he done it. A blind person could see that. And again, he reiterated that he knew he hadn't done it. And he said the truth will always come out. He initially thought that Natalie had sent detectives to his flat when they were coming to make inquiries.
So what he has told the court is that he had been off work for a few days and he was due back into work on Tuesday morning. He arrived into work early on Tuesday morning and he said that he was not allowed, or it was frowned upon to use your phone in work because you had quotas to fill. But at about 9:30, that he got a break and that he got a tea break and he looked at his phone. And at that stage, he had a message from his then partner, the woman who was living with him, who said, there are detectives here. It's something to do with Natalie. They had been exchanging messages the previous day and the Saturday as well. He was using a Nintendo subscription that belonged to Ms McNally and she had cancelled it. And he had messaged her asking had she cancelled it. And there was this exchange of messages and she had said to him, I'm never going to be happy being second best. Enjoy the rest of your night. That had got, I think what he called it one stage, slabbering. There was some messages between the two of them. And he told the court that he thought that as a result of that she had rang police about him. He said he texted Natalie at this stage saying, why the F have you sent detectives to my flat for? And said that because there had been a bit of slabbering, and they're his words, not mine, between the two, I thought she'd sent detectives to my flat to get me in trouble. I did not know she was dead at this point. At this stage, the man then says he received a Snapchat message from one of Natalie's neighbours who he had stayed in contact with after he had moved out of Silverwood Green. She sent him a message saying, have you heard about Natalie? And he said there was a sad face emoji attached to it. He replied, no, why? And he said the message that was returned was she has been murdered.
And we'll touch a bit later about when the detectives came to his flat, what happened before that and during that process. Yeah. But he was cross-examined about his relationship with Natalie's dog.
Yes, he knew the dog. He was familiar with the dog, and the dog actually was the pup of one of his dogs. So he had known it very well. He had found it too difficult to keep two dogs in his small flat and he had asked Natalie to take one of them. He actually said to the court, when I spoke about how I took advantage of her, this is probably a really good example because I knew if I asked her to take the dog, she would, even though she had pets of her own as well. Mm. He was asked about Natalie's habit of leaving the door open and he said she would often have left her front door open. She'd have been the opposite of him in that respect. And was the dog familiar with him? At this stage, he said to the defence, Casey, who is representing Stephen McCullagh, he said, I know where you're going with this. And then he said that he theorised basically that his familiarity with the dog meant that would not attack him. And that's when he said, but it wasn't me in Natalie's house that night, it was him. And he pointed towards McCullagh.
And then that point, the defence barrister asked if the witness had trouble with anger control. How did he respond to that?
He said, I've been extremely stressed for the last few years. I've been accused of a murder, something that I didn't do. The defence asked him about other ex-partners, and particularly the woman he was with when Ms McNally died. The defence barrister, Mr John Kearney, KC, asked if he had ever grabbed her, ever throttled her, ever struck her, ever laid a finger on her. And to each of those questions, the witness replied no. He was also asked about WhatsApp message he had sent to his partner, now ex-partner, last weekend, alleging that he had threatened to strangle her. And the witness said that there was a load of slabbering going on from both parties, admitting that he was arrested the following day. But he said he had made it clear that he didn't want to be with her anymore and that he had blocked and then unblocked her. Asked if he had messaged her and told her he was tempted to go to her house and kick her head in because he hated her so much, he replied, potentially, yeah. This is his words again. He said, there was toxic slabbering going on. That's why I had her blocked to stop all this. I've got wee angry thumbs that send wee stupid messages. The stupid thumbs say stupid things, to which Mr. Kearney replied, well, those wee angry thumbs are connected to wee angry wrists and ultimately to an angry brain. Isn't that right?
And then he was asked if he had a problem with anger management again. He said he could get extremely wound up and say stupid things, but he denied threatening to kill his ex-partner or physically assaulting her. So going forward to when he was told the detectives were at his house, he said that he had reset his phone to factory settings when he was told that they were there. Did he give exact reasoning for that?
Well, he did say that he had cleared his phone to factory settings when he was told detectives were going to be at his home in connection with Natalie McNally's murder investigation. Now, bear in mind what his story the previous day was. He received a message from his ex-partner. He received a message saying, police are here, something to do with Natalie. Then he gets a Snapchat message from a neighbour saying, have you heard about Natalie? She's been murdered. So at this stage, he's racing home to his flat where the detectives are. And he said that he stopped a short distance from his home and he cleared his entire phone back to factory settings. John Kearney KC, again, who is acting for McCullagh, asked about why he would wipe his phone when he was told that detectives were at his County Antrim flat waiting to speak to him. And he said that it was because he had a big bag of weed in his house. The witness then said that he had thought that detectives would smell this when they were in his house and that they would seize his phone, and that he claimed he had messages on his phone that were drugs related, specifically related to weed, as he described it.
And he said he shouldn't have done it, but he was worried they'd want my phone. Now, the last bit of evidence from today, there was an interview tape played to the jury. What was in it? I know it was a minor piece of evidence.
It was very, very short. It was an interview tape of last week. It was the witness in Musgrave Police Station. He was being questioned by a female police officer in connection to sending malicious messages, or allegedly sent malicious messages to his ex-partner, and he repeated to the detective a version of what he had said in court, that he had blocked her, that she'd asked him to unblock her, that she had then said things to him of a nature that had wound him up. I think he said his exact words were, she poked the bear and he bit, and she got a reaction from him. He claimed that he had never physically assaulted her or hurt her, but did admit that he had been sending her messages the previous week.
And what can we expect in the coming days then?
So tomorrow we're going to have another half a day's evidence from the witness, and that should end his evidence. It has been quite lengthy, but he, bear in mind he was an ex-partner of Natalie, so a lot of what was going on here, and they remained in contact right up until the day of her death, so it was relevant. After that, we're expecting to have the ex-partner of the witness,
Allison Morris. Thank you.
If you are already a subscriber to crimeworld.com, you've probably binged on our 6-part deep dive into the life and the rise of the dapper Don Christy Kinahan. From the streets of Dublin to the head of a global cartel, what made and moulded the ambitious Kinahan? And where is he now as he runs from the law? For those of you who haven't joined us yet, here's a short extract from our exclusive series, which is just a click away. So we're going to do a rest here. We're going to start this tome, which is the life and crimes of Christy Kinahan Sr., who has to be the most fascinating individual in the entire sort of Kinahan cartel set. He is an intriguing character, to say the least.
I think he's the most interesting of all the gangland criminals, really, if you see where he's come from and where he's ended up, and how he's managed to navigate through all of those eras of organised crime. An incredible story. If he was involved in another arena of life, he'd be regarded as a kind of heroic businessman. But of course he's not. He's involved in a murderous cartel. But an incredible story. And
there's a little bit of intrigue and mystery to his background, which we're going to go into. Some of it is clear, and other bits, the stories that go around the mix, and you can never, like, for example, some people would say he was a heroin addict. I know he did tell the courts at one point that he did that, but he did it for a reason. And the reason was he wanted a free education.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's very interesting, the heroin addict, and maybe we'll come back to that.
We'll come back to it, because that is something that, certainly some people close to him say that was never the case.
Yeah.
And those who are sort of, I suppose, become his enemies in more recent times would definitely say that, like it's a
stick to beat him.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But there's other little bits that are unusual. We'll start and we'll go through as much as we know factually, and then we'll also discuss the rumours. So he's born in 1957. He's 6 years older than Jerry the Monk Hutch, which just gives him a little bit of a, we can see where he is. He's what I would always say was into the bosom of a respectable middle-class family. Now, some intrigue comes with this. His father, to my understanding, was a taxi driver who worked the Gresham rank on Stephen's Green. And that would have been a good job.
That would have been a good job, a well-earning job. Certainly taxis, back in the day when taxis were protected. His father was also at some point registered, or went, I think, on as a dairy farm manager, and also people would say he was involved in kind of street trading. Not, as a lot of people in Dublin would have been over the years, involved in some stalls and selling in that sort of arena. So Christy Kinahan is raised in Cabra, but his birth cert says that he was born in England, in a place called Perryvale, near Ealing, I think, in London. So this is the late 1950s, when at that time in Irish history, we were, there was high unemployment. A huge number of people left Ireland to go to England at times to get work. Many of them returned, but that would have been one of the big points of emigration, where young couples got married and went over there. Certainly Christy Kinahan wasn't raised in England, but he certainly does seem to have lived there at times. He's had connections to Birmingham and that sort of area, maybe all his life. So he's described, I suppose, as having a middle class upbringing.
Well, I suppose the first house that we can look upon that we know he was in as a child, and he was the only boy in a family of 3 girls, Denise, Maria and Sally Ann. The mother appears to run a B&B from what is a generous Edwardian house. Do you know the name of the road?
Charleville Road.
Charleville Road.
So, I mean, yeah, I know it well. I mean, I would have grown up very close to there. I mean, those houses are worth a huge amount of money. Now, like a lot of houses in that area, for example, those big houses on the North Circular Road, which aren't far away, there probably would have been times where you would have picked them up at a bargain price, but it would be at very, very far away from some of the figures we've discussed. For example, the grinding poverty in which Jerry Hutch would have been born into. Certainly Christy Kinahan would have been raised in something that's now worth a huge amount of money, that home. And it's
would they have always been a middle class sort of a home? We're using that term very loosely here. That's part of East Cabra. Yeah. Right now, if you walk through East Cabra now, you can't. There's organic coffee shops and all of that sort of stuff, and houses being sold for routinely close to $500,000. Like back in the 60s, it wouldn't have been so much like that, I think. And those houses, like a lot of places in sort of Stony Batter or somewhere like that, those houses wouldn't have been seen as posh houses. Would a taxi driver's wage have bought that house?
Well, it would have. It would be far, far bigger than most houses in that area, and would have cost a lot of money. But I suppose it's a different context, and Cabra would have been different then. Christy Kinahan would have been growing up in the 60s, early 70s when he's a teenager, and Cabra at that stage would have been a lot kind of wilder, I suppose. Like a lot of areas, there was a lot of homes built at one stage, and young people grew up, and it certainly would be a far more settled area, just like places like Crumlin and Drimnagh have become far more settled as the time has gone on. So he would have been brought up in an area that I wouldn't describe as being a sort of upper middle class area. He would have been grown up in a working class area, in a big house in a working class area, really.
And yeah, it's the big house.
Yeah.
It's an impressive looking house. It always would have been. We do have some suggestion that the family originally lived in St. Teresa's Gardens.
Yeah.
To go from St. Teresa's Gardens to Cabra and to this Edwardian period property is a huge leap.
It is a huge leap, and people would have said to me, for example, that the connection between the Kavanagh and the Kinahan family, for example, has always been a bit.
Bomber Kavanagh's parents.
Bomber Kavanagh's parents would have known Christy Kinahan's dad. They would have been friendly. All those people have no involvement in crime. There's no suggestion of that, but that it would have been, I suppose, maybe not as straightforward as this is he's a middle class guy. It's somewhere along that line, I suppose. And like most Irish people have, you know, the poverty is only one generation away, I suppose.
Well, he certainly had aspirations, and he was very smart. In school. Though it is said, and you know, it just shows you when somebody gets as big a news story as Christy Kinahan that his leaving cert results have been made public. Do you know that? Didn't know that.
And maybe not made public, but the Sun did a story about how he actually failed his leaving.
Right.
So Christy Kinahan, look, there's no doubt about him being smart, but certainly that was said that he only passed 2 subjects. He would have gone to, it said he went to Declan's in Cabra first and got expelled, and then went to O'Connell's in the North Inner City. Now, O'Connell's Christian Brothers School, probably one of the most famous schools in Dublin. My own father would have gone there. People would have got a scholarship, and it would have seemed to have been a really prestigious school. Past pupils would have included James Joyce, Pat Kenny, the broadcaster, former Taoiseach Sean Lamass, PJ Mara. Also, interestingly, and probably a relative contemporary of Christy Kinahan would have been Tony Gregory would have gone there, who would play a huge prominent role in the anti-drugs marches in the city. So he would have gone. He would have, again, that would have been sort of a prestigious school. But he seems to have not thrived. And then I think we get into a bit of a grey area when he leaves school.
But he excelled, apparently, at sport and at kickboxing.
Yes, and that was a thing that he kept up, I think, through all his life, one way or another. And obviously his sons would have a huge interest in boxing as well.
If you liked what you just heard, go to crimeworld.com now and subscribe for more ad-free listening, exclusive content, and the best crime stories around.